Our film begins with Nora and her father, Tobias, climbing a mountain high until they reach his top, and her father tells her a fairy tale about giants or ghouls of the earth. And from the abundance of light, I heard the story, she will keep it and she will tell it to him. And the story will remain about a wedding that took place in the old days of the land. And there were 13 ghouls in I. They will get drunk so much that they forget the time, and the sun rises on them and they convert, at that time, the stone, and they are the ones who formed the mountains in front of them, and they will remain. Nora can't believe the story until her father asks her to. She concentrates in the mountains with her heart before her eyes and believes in their existence in her hour. She can identify the confusion of giants and is close to believing the fairy tale. After 20 years, his light grows and remains a sign of dinosaur fossils in the Atlantic coast, and the university that it is, its subsidiaries have decided to stop funding their drilling because of months passed without the appearance of any fossils or any positive results for them, until you accidentally discover a dinosaur skeleton found in the ground and call all her team to help her dig and be in an area. A second in the excavations of the construction of a new railway through mountain demonstrations. Stop destroying the mountain and save nature during the explosions. All the tunnels belong to the engineers, and they will be destroyed suddenly because of a mistake in the place of the bombing, and the accident was hidden from the media filming the event from warplanes, and there will be strange effects around the mountain is like footprints, and because no one can explain it, what happened is summoned immediately to the scientist Nora and a group of geologists to interpret the existing effects in Beckel Alley. The effects that the bombing of the mountain was the cause of the movement of the soil from its location and the collapse of the surface completely. And this is what formed these effects, but Nora tells them that it is very clear that these tracks are footprints. But everyone laughs at her, especially the geologist, because I can't believe that there is something called Galen and that Nora's words are about myths and superstitions are nothing more than a video of the protest being shown in front of them. I estimated that she was filming the explosion that took place, and during the filming it appeared a giant ogre is the cause of the collapse, and Nora's words remain the closest. In fact, the Prime Minister gives her the status of scientific advisor to study what happened. Nora moves with Andreas, an office consultant, the Prime Minister, and they go to the nearest apartment site, a strange movement in the mountains. You are removed from his place very easily, and the cause is unknown, and he meets them on site. Captain Chris of the Special Operations Command in Batam investigate with the owners of the house if they saw the cause, and said to them that the weather was full of many clouds and remains a surprise because they were the shadow of the mountain, and that the mountain itself moved, and it was the one who destroyed their house in the way. Then they hid in the basement of the house, and they did not come out of it. Their house is removed from its place, and there are giant footprints, and its light is moving by plane to walk behind the effects that suddenly disappear after 20 kilos without any trace of the person who caused it, and there will be no traces of it for life in the place. And then Nora decides that she must seek refuge to her father, Tobias, to help her with the mystery and be her father. He is old and lives alone in a house alone. You go to his house and you find all the relevant news with him, mountain mules. And this is because he is the only one who believes in their existence and remains suspended. The news of stopping work on the railways in the mountain for an unknown reason. Nor shows him the clip of the destruction of the mountain and the shape of the giant ghoul. He appeared in front of them, and Tobias told them that the ghouls were really there 1,000 years ago, and that the culprit is a ghoul that came out of the mountain and disappeared from existence due to the spread of churches everywhere. But Nora crossed, because she doesn't understand what the churches have to do with the disappearance of the Glen, and she says to him, he must speak rational words, because if the gangs existed, indeed, at least I found their nuclear praise in the mountains, so it would be sought from them. It seems that they take the place, the footprints disappear, and it appears Ali Noor that she does not agree with her father at all because he was imprisoned for a period of time because of his research, and he entered a mental institution because of his incursion in Galen's research and his belief in it to the extent that he was called insane. And Tobias is sure that there is something wrong with the site because the appearance of terrain different from the one with him in the map, and preferably, he goes around the place with Nora until they are shocked, but they meet. The mountain opens its eyes and moves from its place, and then it appears, a giant stone ogre is in front of them. Its length exceeds 40 meters, so they all dragged on on the plane to escape from the place before the ghoul kills them, and they film it so you can see the Prime Minister and reach the headquarters. Chris is to communicate with the Prime Minister and try. Nora explains to them the object they saw in a simple way, but Tobis tells them that the one who appeared is a ghoul, a real giant, and that ghouls are not just a myth, and they should have been. They know the consequences of digging in the mountain because nature must respond on them after they tried to ruin it, and because his words were irrational, no one believes him and guesses that he is a creature that may die and his attribution is complete. The mission of the armed forces is to get rid of him immediately and try to light him, convince Chris that he is taking them with him on the mission to monitor Ellie. It will happen from afar without any interference from them and without anyone knowing. From the Prime Minister and what will happen to him problems. So they reassure Tobis and say that this is how he will die before sunrise, the sun, because its mission will fail, and the specified location will be reached to prepare it, deploy weapons and tanks in which the devices are to meet the ghouls and eliminate them on him, and they remain standing waiting for his appearance, and they are given a release. He will be shot as soon as he appears in front of them, and rockets and bullets will hit him, but without any effect on him. He begins to destroy cars and tanks. It is very easy to hold an injured soldier and eat in front of him. Nora and all of them are trying to escape from the site, except for Tobias. He goes to stand in front of the ogre very calmly and tries to communicate with him and showing the ghoul calmness until a soldier hits him, and he gets angry and hits the wrong side and throws him far away, so you run on him. His daughter to check on him, and he tells her that she must believe and go for the family or the king, and he dies in front of Nora, and she remains unable to understand the words. Her father and Nora return to the headquarters to think about what is happening. What is the reason for the appearance of the ogre, and how is it able to move in the sunlight, and what is supposed to be? The sunlight makes it petrified and does not move, and you prefer to read about me. Her father's thoughts can be solved through drawings and stories. The fictional Belen the ghouls were against religion and did not like the sound church bells, and that they can control the path of the ghouls from during these bells. Nora makes a plan to show it to the president. The ministers agree on it because there are no weapons affecting me, ghoul, and the plan is to install huge discs in planes and get close from the ghouls to set a certain path for him to walk before he approaches the city and destroys it, and the ghoul will move on his garden for families on the outskirts of the city, and planes are trying to be. Bells are really used against him. He is affected by their voice and they try to make him destroy them and be the reason for the destruction of 3 pilots out of 4. And before the plane falls on a child in the garden, the ghoul catches it. He killed the child from death and kept the wreckage of the plane away from him, but his plan, Nora, fails because the ghoul continues his way towards the capital, and there is no available way to stop him, and Nora is trying to convince the Prime Minister. They must study the ogre well before making any move against him, but the minister ends her assistance completely because of the failure of her plan, and she conspires to leave the headquarters immediately, but he sees Andreas act. The minister decides to give up his position and walk with his light from the place and Betage Prime Minister to make a special statement, evacuation of the capital of Norway, because the ghouls are heading towards it, and what fish in front of them is not trying to use all weapons on him. Fearing for the citizens of the capital, they must leave their homes immediately before the persecutors approached. Shooting and warfare sounded against, and Andreas and Nora are there together to keep them away from in the capital. Nora finds the name of a person named Sanding in her father's book, Tobis, who is called the gatekeeper, and Andreas tells her that he knows someone named Sandang, who works in the royal palace, and at that time she understands Nora meant her father when he told her the palace or the king, and that he meant it. The royal palace is in a solution to what is happening, and they move immediately on there to meet the person whose name is S. And Sandang meets them and gets to know Nora the first time he sees her because he looks like her father, and tells her that he expected to visit her so that she could understand what happened. It happens that what is going on for her now is very few that he knows, and they saw before that, and they understood that the royal palace was built on me. The place of an old palace, but it was not owned by human beings, but rather belonged to the gangs, and that Tobis discovered this and had to keep him away and say about him crazy because no one believes his words, and shows them the giant structures underneath the royal palace and tells them that there was a massacre of the gang, and they were killed, all of them, and the last one of them was imprisoned in the mountain and could never get out, whoever imprisoned him, because if he went out in direct sunlight, he would turn into a stone. So Nora understands that the ogre that was imprisoned in the mountain has appeared. He was able to move because the clouds filled the sky and the sun's rays. the directness did not reach the ghoul, so that is why he is able to move in light the day, and you discover a way to stop a ghoul before the armed forces, the ghouls, are bombarded with the most powerful missile. Then the entire city will be destroyed with. The ghoul immediately seeks help from Chris to carry out her and Belga's plan. Andreas to his colleague at the headquarters to try to be late, launch the missile in any way and succeed, disabling the launch system in the planes by hacking the system. With her device, Nora can move a giant skull on a cart to force the ghoul to run after her, because he knows that this skull, especially when I met him until I accidentally got out on the sidewalk and his skull fell off, who is on the car, and the ghoul is holding it, showing that he is sad because of the death of everyone I met and that he is the only one left, or she falls from his hand. The skull is destroyed in the ground, and he looks at a light on his car, and he decides that he is chasing them in order to avenge what happened to his family, and he keeps destroying everywhere he runs, and Nora tries to keep him away as much as you can and get to the place where you told Chris that it is. The ghouls lure him in, and his colleague Andreas controls him. The system of planes, to some extent, a doctor from the headquarters takes into account that it is the only one who does something on her laptop and takes it. May she be well and be arrested for violating orders. And they can return control from the second to the planes and prepare. Launch the missile at the ogre and Bacon Chris is in. It is located and equipped with searchlights for a certain beam, similar to the sun's rays, because they show him to her, and as soon as he gets close to them, they turn on all the flashlights, and she becomes petrified. His leg is in place and tingling. Nora's stationed, but she feels guilty because he keeps hurting in front of her, and so she kills him. So she decides to go to separate the main generator of the flashlights, and she goes under the ogre man as her father did and asks him. He returns again to the mountains, and they do not want to harm him, and before the plane hits the missile, it discovers that there are civilians in the place, so a general orders standing to fire the missile, but the doctor, it would be insistent that they be beaten to get rid of the ghouls in any way. And he keeps shouting at them until his colleague Andreas hits him. Because of that, he is silent, and the orders to fire the missile at the site are stopped, and they are trying. Nora says she is letting the ogre go back to the mountain, but before she finishes her words, it's time for sunrise and the sun's rays come on the ghoul, and you turn into stone and fall in front of Nora after you see him transforming to stone and die in front of her as her father used to tell her, and she would be. Nora's plan succeeded in stopping the ghouls and saving an entire city from destruction, and she thinks that she calls the body of the ogre that she is trying to rock in the name of Socrates, and the prime minister calls her to thank her herself because she acted bravely to save the entire city, and Andreas asked her if there was a second gland found in the circa, rather, no, and it shows her enthusiasm that she intends to look for them, and she completes her father's research again, and a movement appears in the heart of the mountain, the one who was blown up, and what happened was the beginning of the appearance of the ghouls on the land again. This video was written by Yusuf Ibrahim and recorded by Muhammad Taher. This is me, and it was produced by Mahmoud Taher. And don't forget, follow the V50 movie page to see the drama summaries, and follow Muhammad Taher's page to follow the comedy summaries, and follow for Hakona Rubber page to follow summaries of anime and cartoons.